Welcome to the Pencil Bob channel. I hope you enjoy my stories.
The late afternoon sun, a fiery orb sinking low, cast long shadows across my lawn. It was a perfect day, the kind where the air hums with the promise of summer, but the serenity was a lie. A storm had been brewing for months, a tempest of petty regulations and inflated egos, and its epicenter was just beyond our property line. The estates at Willow Creek. We weren't in the HOA, not technically. Our little slice of heaven with its sprawling oak and riot of wildflowers sat just outside their meticulously manicured borders. And yet their oppressive reach still found a way to snag us, all because of a mailbox. My mailbox, a proud sentinel of quirky defiance, painted a cheerful candy cane red and white, a whimsical beacon against the blandness that characterized the estates. It stood there, a harmless, happy thing, a reflection of our family spirit. My wife Isabella had painstakingly painted it herself, a project we'd undertaken together with our kids, Leo and Mia, giggling as we splashed paint and made a mess. It was more than just a place for letters. It was a memory, a symbol of our unpretentious joy. The first volley arrived not with a bang, but with a stiff formal letter, tucked inside a pristine white envelope. The sender, the Estates at Willow Creek Homeowners Association. My brows furrowed as I ripped it open, a sense of unease coiling in my gut. It was from a Ms. Albright, the HOA president whose name should have been Karen, a woman whose reputation for micromanagement preceded her like a bad odor. The letter, typed with an almost clinical precision, informed us in no uncertain terms that our mailbox was a visual disruption and was lowering property values. Lowering their property values, mind you, even though we weren't part of their exclusive club. They demanded we replace it with their HOA-approved standard, a soulless charcoal black box. Failure to comply would result in a fine for a mailbox on our own property, I scoffed, a dry, humorless sound. This was beyond ridiculous. It was an outright assault on our autonomy. They've lost their minds, I declared, tossing the letter onto the kitchen counter where Isabella was chopping vegetables for dinner. She picked it up, her brow furrowing as she read. $100, she said, her voice laced with disbelief. For our mailbox, this is absurd. Leo, ever the inquisitive one, peered over her shoulder. What's wrong with our mailbox, Dad? I like the stripes. Nothing, buddy. I ruffled his hair. Nothing at all. Some people just don't appreciate a little color, I guess. Mia, our little firecracker, stomped her foot. That's not fair. No, it wasn't fair. And that was the problem. This wasn't just about a mailbox. This was about control, about a group of people trying to dictate how we lived our lives, even from a distance. The thought simmered, a low, persistent burn. We had always been good neighbors, keeping our yard neat, never causing trouble. But this was an act of aggression. We ignored the first letter, and the second and the third. Each one arrived with increasing urgency, the fine escalating with every passing week. The initial $100 threat morphed into $200, then $500. Then came the phone calls, automated at first, then from a real, overly polite but undeniably firm woman from a collection agency. The words she used were sugar-coated, but the underlying message was clear. Pay up or else. One Tuesday evening, after a particularly draining day at work, I found a flyer taped to our front door. It wasn't from the HOA directly, but it had their logo prominently displayed, along with a picture of a generic black mailbox. Underneath, in bold accusatory letters, it read, "Is your home contributing to community harmony?" The implication was obvious. They were escalating, moving from private threats to public shaming. They wanted to isolate us, to make us feel like outcasts. I ripped the flyer down, my hands trembling slightly. "That's it," I muttered, my voice low and tight. "They want a fight, they're going to get one." Isabella, who had been watching me, placed a hand on my arm. "What are you thinking?" A slow, deliberate smile spread across my face. "I'm thinking, my dear, that we're going to give them exactly what they want. But not in the way they expect." The idea, absurd and brilliant, was beginning to form. It was a plan born of frustration, yes, but also of a deep-seated desire to protect our family's peace and individuality. It was a plan that would expose their hypocrisy and turn their own rules against them. The more I thought about it, the more I realized this wasn't just about a mailbox anymore. This was about standing up to bullies, about reclaiming our space, about sending a message that we wouldn't be easily intimidated. This was about showing them the true meaning of community harmony, and it was going to be glorious. The next morning the air crackled with a different kind of energy. The initial anger had solidified into a cold, determined resolve. Isabella, usually the voice of calm, had a glint in her eye I recognized. the same one she got when she was about to outsmart someone in a board game. Leo and Mia, though not fully grasping the intricacies of HOA politics, sensed the shift. This wasn't about being mad anymore. It was about strategy. "So the plan," I began, pouring myself another cup of coffee, feeling a surprising lightness in my chest. "They want a black mailbox? They'll get a black mailbox," Isabella nodded, a thoughtful expression on her face. "But not our mailbox." "Exactly," I grinned. "We'll buy the most ridiculously generic HOA-compliant black mailbox we can find. We'll install it right where they can see it, but it won't be for mail. It'll be a monument to their petty tyranny. A monument to decorative use only," Isabella finished, a smile playing on her lips. "Precisely, we'll put a little sign on it, hand-painted of course. Decorative use only. And our real mailbox? It stays right where it is, doing its job." The thought alone filled me with a giddy satisfaction. It was the perfect blend of compliance and defiance, a subtle jab that would drive Ms. Albright absolutely mad. The next few weeks became a meticulous exercise in what I began to call malicious compliance. We went to the hardware store, picking out the dullest, most uninspired black mailbox imaginable. It was a stark contrast to our vibrant red and white one, and the difference almost made me laugh out loud right there in the aisle. Back home we dug a new hole in the yard, carefully positioning the black mailbox so it faced away from the street, its opening a defiant back turn to the HOA's judgmental gaze. The decorative use only sign, painted by Mia with surprisingly neat lettering, was affixed with pride. Our real mailbox, the one that held our bills and birthday cards, stood a few feet away, cheerfully oblivious to the drama unfolding around it. We made sure to use it conspicuously, pulling out letters with exaggerated gestures whenever we saw anyone from the HOA pass by, just to drive the point home. But we weren't done. Oh no. If they wanted visual harmony, we'd give them harmony all right. A monochrome symphony of it. We started with the garden gnomes. Our cheerful, brightly painted gnomes, usually a riot of blues, greens, and reds, were systematically given a new coat of black paint. Their little smiling faces, once so endearing, now looked vaguely menacing in their new, somber attire. Leo and Mia, initially hesitant, soon embraced the absurdity of it, cackling as they transformed a vibrant toadstool into a dark, shadowy blob. Then came the bird bath, the bird feeder, even the decorative birdhouse Isabella had received as a gift. All went black. Our house numbers, usually a pleasant bronze, were meticulously painted over in the deepest matte black we could find. Each week we'd repaint a tiny section of the decorative mailbox, taking multiple photos from different angles, and send them off to the HOA with a meticulously detailed report of our maintenance efforts. We wanted to drown them in documentation, to bury them under the weight of their own bureaucratic nonsense. The collection agency letters continued, growing increasingly aggressive. They threatened legal action, property liens, even public auctions. Each time we responded with certified mail, a paper trail stretching longer than a particularly convoluted snake. Our letters were polite but firm, demanding proof of their authority, copies of contracts, and a detailed breakdown of their alleged damages. We copied everyone, local council members, the city attorney's office, even the local newspaper. We wanted to make sure our side of the story was known, that the light of public scrutiny would shine on the HOA's questionable tactics. The public shaming at HOA meetings became a spectacle. We attended every single one, not as supplicants, but as participants in a carefully choreographed theatrical production. We'd arrive with large, neatly printed posters quoting the HOA's own bylaws, highlighting the sections that clearly outlined the limits of their jurisdiction. Section 4.12. Jurisdiction limited to property within HOA boundaries, one poster would read, followed by an arrow pointing to a map of our neighborhood, our house clearly outside the red line. We handed out flyers to everyone who entered, explaining the situation in clear, concise language. "Your HOA, overreach or oversight," the headline would declare, followed by bullet points detailing their demands, our compliance, and the escalating harassment. Ms. Albright, her face a mask of strained politeness, would try to shut us down, but we were always respectful, always within our rights to speak during the open forum. We'd simply state our case, cite the rules, and then sit down, letting the murmurs and whispers of the attendees fill the silence. It was a slow burn, but we could see the cracks forming in her carefully constructed facade of authority. The other residents, many of whom had suffered their own quiet indignities at the hands of the HOA, started looking at us differently, a flicker of admiration in their eyes. This wasn't just about us anymore. It was about them too. We were fighting for everyone. The question, however, remained. How far were they willing to go to stop us? And more importantly, how far were we willing to go to push back? The tension in the HOA meetings became a living thing, thick enough to cut with a dull knife. Ms. Albright, her perfectly coiffed hair seeming to defy gravity more with each passing week, grew visibly more agitated. Her attempts to maintain decorum crumbled under the weight of our relentless, polite, and thoroughly documented rebellion. Each time she tried to dismiss us, I'd simply hold up another laminated copy of an HOA rule, or a photo of our meticulously black-painted garden gnomes. The murmurs among the other residents weren't whispers anymore. They were growing louder, more supportive. We saw people stifling smiles, exchanging knowing glances. Our malicious compliance was becoming a neighborhood legend, and the cracks in the HOA's rigid facade were widening into chasms. Then came the grand finale of our black-painted art installation. Isabella, with a mischievous glint in her eye, announced her latest project, the house itself. Not the entire house, of course, but the trim. Every window frame, every door frame, every rain gutter, all slated for a fresh coat of HOA-approved matte black. Leo and Mia, now fully invested in our protest, became enthusiastic apprentices, meticulously taping off sections, their small hands surprisingly steady. The transformation was slow, deliberate, and undeniably striking. Our charming, slightly faded cream-colored house began to take on a stark, almost theatrical appearance, outlined in deep black. It was visually harmonious, all right, but in a way that screamed malicious intent to anyone who truly looked. Just as we were putting the finishing touches on the front porch trim, a new letter arrived. This one wasn't from the collection agency. It was from a law firm representing the HOA, threatening a lawsuit for nuisance and intentional infliction of emotional distress. They were clearly desperate. This escalated things dramatically. Isabella and I sat at the kitchen table, the letter spread between us, the words blurring into an angry haze. "This is getting serious," Isabella said, her voice quiet. "A lawsuit, that's a different league." I leaned back, my mind racing. A lawsuit meant legal fees, a protracted battle. But it also meant discovery, depositions, and a chance to expose everything. "They're trying to scare us," I countered, though a knot of unease was tightening in my stomach. "They know we've got them cornered. This is their last-ditch effort." The next HOA meeting was packed. Word of the lawsuit threat had spread like wildfire. Ms. Albright, usually so composed, looked haggard, her eyes darting nervously around the room. She started the meeting with a shaky voice, trying to assert control, but the atmosphere was charged. When it came time for public comments, I rose, clutching a new set of posters. These weren't about mailboxes or gnomes. They were about the HOA's financials, about the exorbitant fees they paid their own legal counsel, about the lack of transparency in their budget. I had spent weeks digging, unearthing every scrap of public record I could find. "I have here," I announced, my voice clear and steady, "documents showing that the estates at Willow Creek HOA has spent over $50,000 in legal fees in the last 6 months alone, all to pursue a single family for a mailbox." I paused, letting the numbers sink in. Gasps rippled through the room. $50,000 of your money, folks. Money collected from your dues being funneled into frivolous lawsuits, all because one person on this board has a vendetta. I pointed a finger directly at Ms. Albright, whose face had gone ashen. "This isn't about property values. This is about ego. This is about power." A man in the back stood up, his face red with anger. $50,000? That's outrageous," others chimed in, a chorus of disbelief and indignation. The meeting devolved into chaos. People were shouting, demanding answers, waving their own copies of our flyers. Ms. Albright tried to gavel them down, but her authority had evaporated. The meeting ended abruptly, a messy, undignified retreat by the board. The local newspaper picked up the story, running a scathing exposé on the HOA's financial mismanagement and their harassment of our family. The city council launched an inquiry into the HOA's practices, prompted by a flood of complaints from residents emboldened by our stand. The tide had turned. The public scrutiny became a magnifying glass, revealing the true nature of the HOA's leadership. Then came the final bizarre turn of events. A week after the newspaper article, a certified letter arrived. It wasn't from the lawyers or even the collection agency. It was from the HOA, but this time it contained an unexpected message. Due to unforeseen circumstances and a shift in community priorities, the estates at Willow Creek HOA was being dissolved. The letter detailed the process, the distribution of remaining funds, and the cessation of all current actions, including our violation. It was a complete capitulation, a surrender so abrupt it felt surreal. There was no apology, no admission of wrongdoing, just a terse, legalistic statement of their demise. We later learned, through neighborhood gossip and a few discreet conversations, that the investigation had revealed a web of financial irregularities and self-serving contracts. Ms. Albright and a few key board members had been using HOA funds for personal expenses, disguising them as legal fees and administrative costs. Our relentless demand for transparency, our insistence on documenting every single interaction, had inadvertently exposed a much larger, more insidious corruption. Our little mailbox, that bright red and white beacon of defiance, had become the thread that unraveled an entire tapestry of deceit. The HOA was gone, its leaders facing legal repercussions, and the neighborhood was free. Our house, still partially trimmed in black, stood as a monument not just to our fight, but to the unexpected consequences of stubborn persistence. We had won, but not in the way we'd ever imagined. No one learned anything, not really, except perhaps that a small act of defiance can sometimes bring down a rotten empire. Okay, so you really thought you were hot stuff, didn't you? Malicious compliance. Please, you basically just painted your house black and annoyed some rich people. Big deal. The whole decorative use only mailbox thing was mildly amusing for about 5 seconds, but then it just sounds like you have way too much time on your hands. And digging into their financials, that's not some grand strategy. That's just basic due diligence if you're going to pick a fight. Honestly, the real story here is how incompetent that HOA was to let themselves get taken down by a family with a red and white mailbox and a paint fetish. You got lucky, pure and simple. Don't go patting yourselves on the back too hard. Let's be real, you're framing this as some valiant stand against oppression, but it just sounds like you're a petty neighbor with a chip on your shoulder. Your quirky red and white mailbox was probably an eyesore to begin with, and you just doubled down on being annoying when they tried to do something about it. The whole visual harmony black-painted gnome parade, that's not clever, that's just passive-aggressive nonsense that probably made your own property look like a goth garden nightmare. And drawing public attention? You mean you went crying to the local paper when you didn't get your way. You didn't destroy the HOA, their own corruption did that, and you just happened to be in the right place at the right time to stumble upon it. Don't act like you're some kind of financial detective genius because you looked up public records. Any half-witted person could do that. The way you spin this, it's clear you're just looking for validation for being needlessly confrontational. You didn't win because you were smart. You won because the other side was spectacularly stupid and possibly criminal. Big difference. And honestly, your house sounds like a depressing mess now. Hope you enjoy living in your self-made monochrome prison. So your goal was to reveal your motivations were different, culminating in a plot twist. The twist is, you're just a spiteful person who likes to make trouble. Your malicious compliance sounds like a thinly veiled excuse to be a jerk. Painting everything black and demanding receipts for every little thing isn't some revolutionary act. It's the kind of thing that makes people roll their eyes. The fact that the HOA was corrupt is completely separate from your initial grievance. You just got lucky your petty squabble happened to unearth something bigger. You didn't outsmart them. You just out-annoyed them until they imploded under the weight of their own pre-existing illegal activities. The whole legendary in the neighborhood part is probably just in your head. Most people probably just saw you as that weird family with the black yard. Get over yourselves.
I would like to thank you for watching the video to the end. To encourage us to make more videos, please like, subscribe, comment, as well as share. Check out this other video if you haven't already.